Hey folks, welcome back. It's good to have you here, and I am honored and excited, energized, enlivened, enthusiastic. That's the E word I'm looking for. Enthusiastic to introduce you to our guest for today. His name is Nick Urban. He is currently my roommate in our house in Austin, Texas. Amazing human I've gotten to know over these last, what's it been, 6 months now.
Yeah.
Um, Biohacking genius, founder of Outlier, which is high performance bioharmonized lifestyle for outliers. And yeah, to be honest, I don't know if we know what we're going to talk about today. I think we've got some, what do you call them? Inklings. Yeah, we've got some subtle intuitions of where we might go. But as you know, Nick knows this, and listeners welcoming you in. This is a field first podcast. And so, what that means is we invite you to become aware and to notice not only the content of what we're speaking about and the topics and territories we're exploring, but also the field of awareness that we are speaking to you from and that pervasively pours through all the objects and symbols and pieces of content that we'll be dancing around and in today. So, welcome, Nick. Welcome to our listeners. Good to have you here.
Forrest, it's great to be here. And listeners, thanks for joining us today. I want to reorient our conversation a little bit right off the bat away from biohacking because I called myself a biohacker for so long. That was my livelihood, it was my fascination. And then I started realizing there's the shadow to biohacking, which is when you hack something, it implies that you're not intended to be there. It implies that there will be some consequences down the line. There'll be patches for computer software or unintended consequences and side effects. So instead of trying to fight against the body and hack it, I much prefer the term harmonizing or bioharmonizing, as I call it, to work with the body to support it on all dimensions of wellness.
I am just cheering from the moon. I love this, Nick, that this just showed up. So this resonates with me a lot in my own personal history. I used to be a biohacker, identified as a biohacker, and I got to a point where I realized I'm using biohacking to uh, perpetuate unhealthy lifestyle dynamics, right? Like as long as I take activated charcoal when I drink alcohol, it'll pull out all the toxins and I can still drink. Can give a bunch of examples of that, but I really had a regimen of cold showers every day, watching the sunrise every morning, uh, diet protocols, supplement protocols, intermittent fasting, getting into it was like I could have a really unhealthy lifestyle. And then if I did a 3-day fast and got into the program cell apoptosis so I could regenerate my cell. It was going, okay, I'm really figuring out how to hack health while perpetuating a really unhealthy, arguably even addiction oriented lifestyle. So I love that you're bringing the shadow of biohacking. I know it well, or at least some of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like those things, if you're going to engage in those activities, it's great to do some damage mitigation, to take the activated charcoal or support your liver and glutathione and hopefully your brain as well. But like there's no amount of molecules you can introduce, no pathways you can activate that are going to completely negate, first of all, the calories, the shift in metabolism, the like, acetaldehyde and different things that go on when you drink alcohol. And of course, in small amounts, it's not going to be the same impact on your biology as it will when you have it in crazy large binge drinking, five shots over the span of 1 hour kind of dosages. But ultimately, people who are engaging in a lot of the extreme activities already know the answer. And a lot of the ancient medicine practices talked about balance. Like that was one of the most consistent themes across. I've studied Ayurveda and also a little bit of Chinese medicine, but then there's also the indigenous medicines around the world. And their big thing is helping the body return to balance. And the easy thing, instead of trying to introduce all these new things, new molecules, new protocols, however fancy, is to reduce the things that are taking us further out of balance.
Yeah, incredibly well said. I love that. I mean, in what you're saying, you're bringing I'm making an infinity loop with my hands, but a relationship between Eastern and Western consciousness. And I want to go into that. But before that, I want to go more into this transition that you're speaking about because I'm hearing you're going from biohacking to bioharmonizing. You're going from mind body peak performance to outlier. I'm hearing seems like an identity shift, a branding shift, a worldview shift. Bring us more into what's going on for you right now.
So, yeah, I've obviously changed my identity and personality quite a bit over the years, and that might seem like a foreign concept to some people, perhaps not your listeners, that you can actually change your personality. But as I started doing some of the inner work, I realized my longstanding personality that I had clung to since childhood wasn't actually a fixed part of myself, and it was just an adaptive response to my life circumstances. And as I was confronted by different relationships and traumas and things that came up, and I actually like sat with that and figured out what it was that I was gaining out of the experience, why I kept bringing up these same loops with other people. Then I turned inward and I did this really extreme challenge, at least it seemed extreme to me, which was for 2 weeks, I set an alarm for every 20 minutes on my phone. And I would check in when every time the alarm went off, and I'd figure out what I was thinking, feeling, and wanting. And from someone who was like very dissociated from playing sports and having that beaten out of me metaphorically by my coaches and by society, that was like the fastest way that I could get back into my body and figure out what it was that I was feeling, what I was experiencing, and then use that as a compass. Because I currently use a lot of wearables and track my data, and that stuff is helpful. But ultimately, there'll be days when the data says one thing and what my body says is totally different. Like I will wake up feeling exhausted and very drained. My Aura ring or Ultra Human ring will say, perfectly recovered. You are ready to go. Go hit the gym hard. And I'll be like, but I'm exhausted. I don't want to get out of bed. And so obviously there's a disconnect there. And if I trust the data without, and at the same time, ignore my own life experience, that's led me astray versus trusting what I feel when it's genuine and it's not just like a little bit of laziness, then that keeps me on a better path forward.
Yeah. What have you found most supportive for you in this transition you're navigating?
Hmm. I'd say that the most supportive thing I found so far has been other people who understand like going through life transitions and that it's okay to like go from seeming like you have it all figured out and having like your direction sorted and then to decide that it doesn't fit you properly and to adjust. So being in the field of others who are or have done something similar is really helpful. And as well as like spending time in meditation and contemplation and yeah, I guess shifting more from doing to more of being and allowing things to come through. That's been a big theme of mine this year is to like I keep coming into situations, the people around me are appearing to be doing very little. At least it's not like a linear output type of thing, but they are getting ahead by typical standards, even though they're not following what is assumed to be a prerequisite of success.
Mhm.
So letting myself like, surrounding myself with the right people first of all, and then letting myself go into a process and figuring out what feels right, and then once I have the inspiration to actually follow through on it.
I I have a question, but I want to contextualize it because you and I have some similar backgrounds in a way. I mean, we were both athletes growing up. We've both been entrepreneurs. We're both 30 something year old males who are tall and enjoy workouts and got into biohacking. And there's similar there's similar lines through passion, curiosity, contexts that we've explored. And this way of relating with our experience where we're shifting more to being and opening up and allowing and letting go of the rigidity of practice, schedule, workout, training, homework, business build, like it has a rhythm to it. It has a da 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 da. And shifting into something else. I mean, in my own personal experience, this has been a real challenge to navigate because all of the mentorship
Yes.
I ever have received. I mean, my dad played college football for crying out loud, and his dad was in the military. I mean, the all the training that I ever got was push it harder, push through the pain, dig in, don't be a insert pejorative word here, right? So I'm super curious about you and what it's been like to navigate this, knowing some of your history and context that you're transitioning out of, transitioning through, still holding and in relationship in some ways. Uh,
Mm,
and then where you mentioned people in your life, it landed in me like maybe some influencers or people who you receive mentorship from, maybe some also some people close to you. But I'm just curious about your experience in this unfolding here.
mm. The big like life-changing moment for me was when I joined my first men's group not too long ago. And all of a sudden I saw men opening up and confiding in each other about their experiences. And there's the highlight reel that we all see on social media and their own personal lives, very different stories. And having that safe container for men to open up and share was like really transformative to me. And all of a sudden I realized that although, like you were saying, the older mentors in my life don't necessarily relate. Their approach was the grind it out, push forward. If you're not bleeding, you're not pushing hard enough kind of mentality. That isn't the only way. And ultimately, I looked at them and saw success in one domain, and I thought that okay, that might work for them in their one domain. But if I look at their lives as a whole, do I want to live that kind of life? Do I want to sacrifice for 60, 70 years to be able to enjoy the last decades of my life, enjoy, like who knows what the quality of those years is going to be. So then started looking at other models, and that's kind of how I approached health and wellness to begin with also. Like I was studying neuroscience in college, and I found it interesting, but I didn't want to be a doctor, so I decided I wasn't going to go down that route. And then I also was looking at like, okay, these are the ideas that pervade like the modern thinking, whether it's for like pharmaceuticals or it's for health interventions or it's for like disease reversal, like all these types of things. And I said, well, if we have like so few solutions, perhaps there's someone somewhere in the world who has solutions, or if not currently, perhaps they had solutions at different points in history. And that's what got me into the world of Ayurveda specifically when I started like tracing it back and figuring out that 5,000 years ago, there's records of a physician, I think he's a surgeon, talking about how doctors of the future were going to perform autopsies and there's going to be plastic surgery and all these things. We're told that these medical systems are archaic, barbaric, they have no merit. But then we start to see like bioenergetics and the importance of light and digestion and metabolism, all these things like coming to the forefront of like our current scientific knowledge base. And these are concepts that were written about in recorded history 5,000 years ago in these systems.
Yeah. It's such a for me it was such a disruptive experience. I mean, my when I was 19 years old, my dad got diagnosed with cancer and this made no sense to me at all. I mean, he was never smoked a cigarette in his life, college football player, fit at 50, 55, 60. I mean, just it didn't make any sense. And then I started looking into the FDA and I started looking into the standard American diet. And I started looking at my own lifestyle. And I was in college drinking beer and eating pizza and the things in addition to going to the gym and powerlifting and looking at macros and protein, but there was like something really, really missing. And watching him go through the journey of having cancer for 5 years and traveling to India while I was in college and then spending time in Southeast Asia and other parts of the world, it was kind of like, whoa, a mind-shattering, paradigm blasting, like what are we doing here in terms of health and well-being in the West? And of course, now this is almost 15 years later, and we're way more hip to this collectively. I mean, just look at the Make
Yeah.
America Healthy Again movement in places like Austin, where pretty much everybody here is a biohacker or a well-being practitioner or something along these lines. So we've come a long way.
Yeah. And to answer your other question about like what it was, so the men's group was huge in my own journey. And like just joining that, being around it, like, confronting, getting confronted and confronting was new. to me, and that caliber and that regularity and frequency. I found myself not wanting to show up sometimes because it was a little uncomfortable. It was really like an edge for me at the time. But then it wasn't just the in-person men's group that I was attending. It was also like being here physically in Austin, where there's a lot of other people who are on their own paths and they're not following what was laid out for them. And being in that field has helped tremendously, including just like living here with you and having a lot of really cool, deep conversations.
Yeah, I love the ways we get to hang out and drop in and I keep okay. I keep hearing Tim Ferriss's name. Does Tim Ferriss have some kind of place in this conversation? You just keep hearing his name.
That's hilarious. Yeah, I didn't say Tim Ferriss a single time, but you're right. Like in my own journey, when I was like looking into alternate routes, I was working at a startup back then, and wanted to, I always wanted to create a startup of my own. And then I actually was in the company itself, and I was looking around. I'm like, oh, okay. Everyone in this company answers to someone, including the CEO. He answers to the board. Like, I don't necessarily want to optimize my life around this so that I can have like a high stress with a job with an opportunity of making it big. I'd rather build a lifestyle business, optimize it, build it around my lifestyle, and then I'll obviously leave some money on the table in comparison to someone who's really putting everything into it and has like the growth pressures of external funding. But to me, the lifestyle approach sounded much more appealing. And I came across Tim Ferriss's book, The 4 Hour Work Week, and followed his work since then. But that was like for me a catalyst into seeing that there is another possible route.
Mhm. Mhm. I'm getting really energized over here as I'm listening to you because I've been working on a meta model for well-being that currently has 9 variables. So there's neuro, psychosomatic, energetic, kinesthetic, and then social or cultural, systemic, financial, and relational.
Mm,
And the financial piece I hear in what you're saying. Um, Financial well-being is a thing, and so many people. I mean, you and I have talked about this in our just hang around the house conversation. Like so many people talk to me about. I feel like I got to this point where I hacked or I optimized a certain level of health and well-being in my life and a certain level of money in my life. And I've gotten to the point where they're maxed out. If I'm going to get more of one or the other, I'm going to have to sacrifice
mm.
one. So I'm either gonna have to give up money to get more well-being, or I'm gonna have to lose well-being to get more money. And um, well, I could keep going, but I'm just gonna say I'm with you. I love this. I love the more inclusive, holistic orientation of how do I include a livelihood as a co-generative dynamic in a well-being lifestyle.
Yeah. And I think that also might be a bit of a false dichotomy that you can't have both. I think there are alternate models, but it's going to require going out of, again, the conventional like systems to accumulate that, to test that out. And it might involve falling, scraping your knee a little bit, but ultimately there are ways. It's just less charted or at least less documented.
And there's a it's not a magnitude, but there's a gravity to the collective consensus culture of we work inside organizations that have managers that report to vice presidents, that report to a C-level, that report to a board.
Yeah.
This is how the world works. And for those of us who are called to well-being and living a life of freedom and vitality and something more, right, than just kind of being a cog in a machine. I mean, that's so mean to be so like about, whatever that is about it, but it is that in some ways. And it's challenging because there's like a wild, wild west thing of okay, if I leave that, then what? And
Yeah.
the real entering of a not knowing and a void or an unknown or a if not that, then what? But the what is the way.
Yeah. And I think there's also ways of minimizing risk at the same time. Like it can obviously be very dramatic and even possibly traumatic to just drop everything and then just say, okay, I'm done with that life. Now I'm gonna figure it out. Like I'm gonna build a plane as I'm going down to the ground. Like that's a lot. what I did personally is like while I was working at a startup, I moonlighted and on nights and weekends, I slowly started to build like focus on the things that I enjoyed doing. And then eventually after a full year of that, I published, I think it was my first 100,000 words online before I saw my first dollar of revenue from that. And it was mainly like to help friends out who were asking for it. And then also because I found these topics interesting and it gave me a chance to do my own research. But like I still had some safety net in place while I was building this, made it much more attainable and less scary.
I love this. I feel like there's so much that we can learn from you in this because I didn't do this. I just jumped out of the bird's nest and plummeted straight at the ground until
Wow.
I could get strong enough to start flapping my wings and fly. And I like hit every branch on the way down. I mean,
Uh,
so I want to get more into your experience actually. Because this is part of the way that I relate with clients that I have now. I have a lot of clients who are in the corporate world and are starting to get curious about, I'm 30 years old, I've made $1 million. There's got to be more to life, but there's a danger zone here of if I leave the safety and security of that income and go to like a meditation retreat and a Vipassana and an energy work thing, like I know people who have burnt through hundreds of thousands of dollars and millions of dollars of savings and then ended up completely broke with no way to generate any income
yeah.
or kind of like let's just say not really humming, like maybe there's a little bit here and a little bit there, but there can be more skillful ways to explore our interiors, to explore what's beyond consensus reality,
Yeah.
corporate, late stage corporate America, capitalism, et cetera, with having more arguably skillfulness about it in the way that you did. So all that to say, all that to contextualize, tell us more, Nick.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because doing those practices it can be very jarring. And if you go into them without any forethought, then it's very possible that you'll realize that you want to take an entirely different avenue with your life and all of a sudden make a drastic shift pretty much overnight. And that can eliminate any guardrails, any safety nets you have in place. And there's nothing wrong with that per se, but it's also just like knowing your own risk tolerance. Some people can tolerate that. They thrive on the pressure of like, okay, I have 1 month of runway, I have 6 months of runway, I have a year of runway, and then figuring it out as they go down, even if it means hitting a bunch of branches on the way down. But some people, like myself, like I wanted a little more safety, a little more reassurance that things were going to work out. It was my first time like venturing out into entrepreneurship. Didn't have any like killer ideas that I had seen like fleshed out and working from my peers. So you can really go multiple routes, but if you choose the route of like, I'm going to try a like silent retreat or I'm going to use plant medicines or something, it's like that might work great. And if you don't have any experience, you might also want to like think, okay, if I want a major life shift, am I okay with that? And then going in accordingly.
There's something, I mean, I feel it in your transmission. I hear it in the story. There's something that feels way more stable. Like, if I judge myself, I feel like mine's been a lot more manic and chaotic, and yours feels a lot more stable and grounded and harmonized. Mine feels more like clanging up against the walls a bunch and sort of you know how in bowling you bang up against the bumper and still go down and hit the pins, but I feel like yours is kind of moving down in a nice way and mine's banging back and forth between the walls. But
But there's really like no right or wrong approach. Like in bowling, it if there's no gutters, there's no lanes, there's no safety rails, then you only have one chance. Like you have to go and you can't bounce it off because there's nothing there. But in life, like there are the two different routes and there's not one that's better or worse. It's just like one that looks smoother and therefore is more looks more appealing to a lot of people, but like doesn't work for everyone. Some people need that extra pressure.
as you say that, Nick, it gets me curious, like, okay, in a transition, right? As I'm listening to you, there's a big letting go and a releasing of something that you've been identified as your personality, that's been your identity digitally in relationship with people. And then there's generally in a transition, you have this kind of unknowing or between space, and then something else starts to come in and comes online. So I'm curious about that piece. Like what's coming in, what's coming online for you in the next wave?
Hmm. I think one of the things for me is like tapping into more of the non-physical because like I've been meditating my entire adult life and that's been nice and helpful. But then I also realized that I have that as a separate practice from the rest of my day. And I go and I do my 10 minutes to an hour, depending on the day, whatever it is. And then I say, okay, that was a great session. And maybe I'll use neurofeedback or something and I'll bring technology into it. Okay, after that 30-minute session, then I'm back on my day and then I'll repeat tomorrow. And now it's more bringing that awareness into my conversations, to my meetings, to my work, and generating, if you will, from a different place and a different space.
Mhm. Can you say more about this place and space?
Yeah. So I talk a lot about supplements and nutrition and technologies and biohacks. And I find myself like, because these are the things people ask about and they care about and they want to read about. But then I find myself repeating the same things like do the basics first, and I list off the basics. And once you do these, then only then consider these like fancier, flashier designer supplements and ingredients that everyone's talking about that aren't as impactful as making sure you don't have any like foundational nutrient deficiencies. So now it's like taking that awareness of like what people want and then also what feels good to me and leaning into doing more of what feels good to me in my business. And even if there's less SEO potential, there's less like it makes less sense on paper, just doing things that I find mo like most interesting to me and putting my energy, like my soul into it. Because when I do that, I've noticed the few times I've done that, and I've been doing more of it proportionally, that those posts get the most engagement, the most social shares and everything. So like changing the way I orient to my business.
Mhm. Yeah, I hear the word authenticity as you're speaking. It's like it lands in me as letting go of the concept of how we're supposed to do things or the way that things are done and going more with our soul knowing that that's what I heard in what you're saying of and also our enjoyment and
Yeah.
what we really yeah what lights us up or helps us or it makes us feel fulfilled as a compass or as a navigational tool for our own unfolding or our business building.
Yeah. I'm also noticing right now in the moment that as I decided I was going to take a different path from the others around me in my immediate life, I decided that that was okay. But then at the same time, I looked into the publishing world and running an online business. And instead of just saying, I'm going to go my own way here too, I said, okay, well, I already went my own way over here. So now I'm going to follow the conventions and really focus and make sure I have the keywords and the title and this and that, which isn't completely in alignment in a way. It's like, not a complete departure from the conventional path, and it hasn't been true to myself as much as I've wanted, and obviously I'm moving more in that direction these days.
Yeah, as I'm listening to you, I get curious, like where and how am I still doing this? Like living out other people's stories or like society or culture stories for how I ought to be doing things. Um,
And that's another area where I think about it, and a lot of times there's a reason that society and culture says these are the right things to do. Sometimes they have merit, and you can figure out if it does or doesn't for you. But I'm also like aware of the part of me that is is rebellious and just wants to do something to defy the the convention and take my own route, even if it's not the most effective. And be like, ha, there I am on my own trail, even though it's not always the best.
I'm so appreciating your awareness of these kind of shadow dynamics, right? Like there's a we take in a story from culture about how we're supposed to be, and then we manufacture a personality that's polarized against that introjected concept of how we're supposed to act. That's like a rebel. And this is a lot of entrepreneurship. This is a lot of biohackers. This is a lot of personal development
Yeah.
coach, anti whatever. And as we become aware of this, right? It's like, okay, if I'm not anti whatever the thing is, and I just start to become aware of the thing and let that go, then what happens? Right. And that's like, that starts to be a doorway into actual authenticity.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's the awareness, like being able to step back, to zoom out and just like feel it, whatever that thing is, and then keep that awareness. And then you don't necessarily need to react or respond immediately. I was listening to one of your previous podcasts, and the guest was mentioning how we feel the need to respond to an email as soon as we get it, but you don't actually need to. And a lot of times, if you just like think about it, maybe you start drafting it and you just sit on the email for a bit, all of a sudden, at some point, a download will come to you, and you'll have a much better response than you would otherwise.
And it brings in some crazy, crazy things. Like it's beyond the capacity to understand. Like the more I trust that, it's like I used to not, it's like, it's so crazy, right? Somebody emails me and then I don't email them back right away. And I used to go through these things of like, why am I procrastinating? What's wrong? I need to set a goal. I need to have accountability. Maybe I should, no, no, no. And it's like, the more I've let go of all that stuff and just go with the impulse when it's here, it's like all kinds of dynamics that I'm not even aware of are at play, like the person's mood when my email drops, or like you emailed me on Monday, but I responded on Friday, and on Wednesday you had a conversation with someone that we both know that has to do with the thing that I'm responding to you about. It's all like time is this crazy thing um, that we can play with if we're open to letting things unfold in their own time
Hmm.
or
So,
moment.
how did you personally go from being like maybe the archetype of like an athlete that's like hard charging, like pushes through everything, and then all of a sudden you're willing to have more like I don't love the term, but self-love and patience with yourself so that you can pause on emails, and that's one small example, and give it a couple days and not beat yourself up about not responding immediately.
I love this question and it feels really hard. Like it's such a, how do you, it's like I have to point to everything to point to, um, uh, yeah. Let me just take a moment here and receive
Mhm.
the question. One thing is, I think my entire life I've seen that both in myself and, human beings tend to like claim to know what's going on or what to do or what's right and what's wrong. And, um, at some point that really fell apart to me. It's like I remember in my 20s being like, why isn't anybody being honest that we just don't have a clue what the heck is going on? Like, where's the
Yeah.
honesty? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, uh, and I think in that like cracking open of claiming to know what's going on all the time, there's a connection to a really deep love that's
Mm.
all pervasive and always present. Like it's pouring through everything and holding all of us. And it's like, oh, wow, like this has always been here. And I have never been present to it. I've been so caught up with my stuff um, that I haven't felt it. But it feels way more just like um, truth in a deeply felt sense way, like in a, I guess you could say in a kinesthetic way or a sensorial way or experiential way.
Mhm.
It's just,
Mhm.
oh, I don't have to create a concept or a belief system or a worldview or a theory to experience this love. Like it's just here. And the more I get connected with it and ask it questions, it's like it's never not been here. Um, and then when I ask it what it wants, it just starts to come into me more and more and more. So it's really that love that is the truth of, reality seemingly. Um, that feels like it's taking over more and more and giving me grace and patience to like let go of all these things I've been carrying around about who I ought to be and how I ought to be uh,
Mm.
and create a new moment, right? Like from spontaneous presence, something else happens that feels really genuine and authentic. It feels the most me and the least me in the world because it feels like it's really just this love acting as me. Um, but it also it's like that feels like what we really are. So it's the most intimately me thing and also the least me thing, which is
Mm.
so paradoxical. But yeah, so
Yeah. How do you discern between that and the inner voice that might tell you that, hey, you're being lazy or you really should be doing this? And like, how do you reconcile the two or let them coexist?
Well, I mean, one just to like skip to the good part, one thing to do is like notice what happens as the all-pervasive love contacts the voice that's doing the
Hmm.
talking, doing the criticizing, or asking that voice like, "Hey, do you want to let some of this love in?" Like, you don't have to, you know. Um, but just seeing that that voice is also held in this ocean of love, it's like,
Hmm.
oh, um, and the whoever is the receiver of that, I'll just call it criticism, is also held in this ocean of love. And so what happens to the one giving the criticism and the one receiving the criticism as they come more consciously in contact with the love that's always been here, and just watching that unfold, like what starts to happen both for each of them themselves and then also in their dynamic.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I like to look around and see that dynamic in other people. I mean, maybe not the other critical voice, but like when something happens and it bothers me, noticing my own reaction to it and then like holding space for myself and letting the love contact the part of myself that is putting up the wall and being harsh, and then also looking at the other person and like realizing that I have no idea what's going on in their world, their day, their instance, their nervous system, and like holding that compassion for them. And it can feel very tricky at times, like when someone seems to have slighted me in some way, to be like, you know what, I'm just gonna pause and like I'm gonna let this sink in for me, but also for them. But it's one of those practices that like can dramatically like decrease my stress when I'm otherwise like in fight or flight.
Right, right. There's a lot in that because the fight or flight oftentimes is coupled with a perceived threat, and that's again, staying connected to the big love in that is often really uh helpful and supportive. And there's something, as I'm listening to you, I just hear the word devotion. Like there's a real devotional practice in noticing, like, okay, in this moment I'm having a reaction or I'm getting triggered. And instead of acting that out on somebody else, I'm going to allow myself to get resource so I can come from, uh,
Yeah.
um, I'll just say my heart. I
Hmm.
can come from my heart in connection with this person. Doesn't necessarily mean I'm don't need to create a boundary or I don't need to make a request for something or I'm just like a pushover. It doesn't mean
Yeah.
that. But I also don't need to act out my triggers on other people.
Yeah, that's been one of the big shifts in my life over the last handful of years is like, I guess through my meditation practice and neurofeedback and heart coherence training, all these things, I've been able to increase the wedge between a stimulus and response. And now I'm aware of like when my nervous system starts feeling dysregulated, the different bodily cues and sensations I get. And by being able to just recognize those, like releasing anger feels really good, but it's damaging. It's not just damaging to me and the relationship, it's damaging to them as well. So being able to take a minute and say, "Hey, I'm feeling like triggered by this, upset, and I'm gonna go calm down for a few minutes. I'll be back in 5, 20 minutes, whatever it is, and let's reconvene this conversation because I want to show up as my best self." Like showing it in service of like how this is benefiting the relationship and at the same time what I'm doing is like one of those like life skills that I was never shown or taught, but like should be one of the things we learn in school.
Totally. It's like the most advanced capacity in the world that's so basic. I mean, there's
Yeah.
so much wisdom in what you're sharing. You'd think it'd be part of human being 101 training, and yet, you know, it's not. So.
Yeah, this world would be so different if that was something that people learned and they were encouraged to practice.
Yeah, and exactly as you said it, for the sake of our relationship, I need to take a pause and get resourced or call a friend or whatever it is, go for a walk, get some eco regulation like
Yeah,
sunlight, water, salt, whatever it is, and then and get grounded, get resourced, connect to my heart so that I can speak to you in a way that continues to support a healthy dynamic here.
exactly. And it's less about like, hey, you did this, you're wrong, you're bad. And it's more about like, hey, this is how I'm feeling. You can't argue with someone about how they're feeling. If you say that you did this, it's like, well, now I can turn this into an argument. I can tell you you didn't actually do this. You did that, but I actually did this first. So then it's like whose court is the ball in? But like when you say you put it and phrase it in terms of like this is what's going on with me, and I need some space, but I'm gonna come back to this and I want to like repair afterward. It changes the tension in the interaction.
Yeah, we often say like own your experience, or in therapy they say use I statements, like I feel or I think or whatever. It's like it's hard to challenge that, or it's hard to argue with that. If you tell me I feel happy, it's like, well, no, you
Unless you
don't.
say, unless
Yeah.
you say, I feel like you did this. That like that doesn't work the same.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. One of the background intentions that I've had for this conversation that I want to offer to our listeners is you mentioned the basics of, I don't know if you call it the basics of biohacking or the basics of the well-being, but there's like really advanced biohacking stuff that we could talk about. But people who listen to my podcast might want to go there with us, a really advanced conversation about biohacking. My story is if people could walk away with some basics. I just mentioned salt, right? So there's electrolytes. I just mentioned sunlight. I just mentioned eco-regulation. But I wonder if we could just spend a couple of minutes talking about, you mentioned food, nutrition, basics, fundamentals. So I wonder if we could just touch on a couple of core component basic, whether you want to call them bioharmonizing principles or kind of pillars of a well-being lifestyle for you. I think that would be a great gift to give the listeners.
Sure. Well, there's a lot of different routes that I could take this and rabbit holes can take us down. But let's like start off with a very high level. Like it's helpful to orient the entire conversation. I mean, you can start with mindset, but that's like not something people want to talk about. But having a reason that you want to be healthy, like what is it that that's going to enable you? Like how is your life going to look and feel and be different if you're in a good state of health, and health can be what you want it to be, like that, you can have a loose definition there. And then after you have like a clear reason, or if you can't even find a reason, then it's like, what are you wanting to avoid? I prefer like the affirmative version if possible, but if you really can't think of anything, it's to look at like what are the consequences of poor health, whether it's financial, it's relational, it's environmental, you can name it. But like figuring out what you want to go towards or away from, and then to me, balancing like the growth and the breakdown forces. Like that could be, I mean, you can really fit pretty much all of life under balancing anabolism, growth, and catabolism or the breakdown process. And that's like what the concept of yin yang incorporates inside of it. And you can look at like all the lifestyle practices, but like if you're not eating well, if you're excessively fasting, you're working out really hard, you're stressed, you're going to have a lot of the breakdown factors and very few of the building factors, the growth factors. So balancing those, knowing where you are, some people, like depending on their constitution, their type, they naturally have a lot of the growth factors and they can benefit from adding some more of the breakdown factors, the fasting, the intense exercise, the sauna, the cold plunge, those things. But so really making sure you know where you are in that hierarchy and balancing the two forces. Now we can also just make it very simple and practical and talk about some of like the foundational things that don't require abstract thought, such as moving every day. You can think of the human body like a battery, and getting outside, getting sunlight, grounding or earthing, if you want to call it that. Those are both helpful for activating the anabolism or the repair parts of the body. Um, Stress reduction is a good one. There's a lot of different ways of doing it, from breath work to meditation to eco forest bathing, just walking through the woods, ideally not doing anything, spending just time in quiet is really healthy and building of bodily systems and overall energy or life force. Diet is a very controversial one, and people are different. There's an excellent book called Biochemical Individuality by Roger Williams, and he goes through the entire human body and shows how different humans are from one extreme to the other. And looking at the extremes, he'd find that some humans would have a stomach that was 6 times smaller than another human on either extreme. Then he went through enzymes, proteins, all different parts of the body and found similar stuff. So there's really not one universal diet that works best for everyone, but there are some universal principles like eating whole foods, varying diet so you don't develop any intolerances, uh, getting enough water. There's like lots of fundamental things that everyone's heard of, and then it's easy to get sucked into carnivore or veganism. There's like a bunch of keto, all these things, Paleo Atkins, and they can work, but then as long as that's not becoming your identity of who you are, because then you ignore information that might help you down the line. A lot of these things work great in the short term, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, but then eventually the body compensates and issues start to arise. And that's why there's like so many different warring diet tribes online.
Yeah. Yeah, we could unpack that one quite a bit, but I think the way I've been thinking about it recently is a lot of these diets, like carnivore and vegan, for example, in my worldview, are used more for healing, not for lifestyle. Like it's something to do, um, almost like a fast. It's something to do for a time period, a cycle, but not as a lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I always say that the diet that gets you healthy won't necessarily be the same diet that keeps you that way.
Exactly. That's so well said. That's so well said. Okay, I want to flesh out what you shared a little more. So you gave some examples of catabolic processes or catabolic
Hmm.
practices, sauna,
Hmm.
uh, cold plunge, fasting, exercise. Can you give some for the anabolic growth side of
Yeah.
practices or things
Yeah.
that?
So, like the fundamental ones that everyone's already doing, hopefully sleep and just spending time in quiet. There's another form of exercise. It's not, I guess it's working out is traditionally seen as the form of exercise. There's something Paul Chek, one of my mentors, calls working in, and that is where you do sometimes the same exercises, but you do them at a very, very, very low intensity. And there's certain criteria that you check to make sure that you're doing this in a way that's actually building your energy instead of expending it. Like when you're doing it, your respiration rate should not increase. Your breath should stay about the same. Your tongue should stay wet. Things like this that you can check to make sure that if I do a squat, it's actually building my body instead of depleting it. So there can be some types of movement, also Tai Chi, Qigong, these types of movements are growing and rebuilding versus the heavy squats I do at the gym, which are not growing initially. They're breaking my body down so that in the future, after I rest and recover amply, then it rebuilds stronger. Other things you can use to grow, I mean, grounding is or earthing when you expose your bare feet to earth helps with that. Uh, yeah, just relaxation practices in general. So giving your nervous system some time to regulate.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, okay, I want to talk more about the nervous system, but before we go into that, I want to, at the very beginning, you prefaced it with something like find your why. Why do you want
Mm,
to why do you want to have
hmm
well-being in your life? And I want to actually
hmm
ask you this question. Like, what's your why here?
mm. I've helped a number of people over the years, and I feel like selfishly very good when I'm in service to others and helping them find that breakthrough, what's like either sabotaging their health or these little tweaks that they make and they feel or perform a lot better in the field or in the classroom or at their job a lot better. So to me, it's just like doing the research myself and helping cut through some of the noise to then be able to help and turn around to the people around me and help them look, feel, and perform their best.
And so would you call that your personal reason for wanting to embody well-being and health in your life?
Currently, yes, but I'm also very open to that changing and shifting down the line.
I love it. I mean, being of service, right? I love that. And there's like, I mean, of course we know, right? You can conceptually understand something or you can actually embody it and you're walking the embodied path of being able to share not just books and theories about things, but also I mean, you live this stuff all day, every day. I see you. I mean, you live this.
And
Um,
I love the books and theories, but like I will read and I will come across theories and then I'll actually test them and I'll like there's so many different schools of thoughts that just because you read something in a book doesn't make it more valid than your own experience or than other theories that are out there too. Like I was just reading a book and the it was about vitamin C and the author was talking about it was a book on liver flushes and the author was saying that like this is the number one issue in medicine that gallstones are formed in the liver are completely undiagnosed and if medicine paid attention to this then all of a sudden people would be healthy again and I read that and sure it's an issue but in the scheme of things calling it the most important undiagnosed factor of modern medicine is a bit far-fetched so it's like a lot of people don't ever do any of these flushes and they do fine in life. They don't have any of the diseases that are associated with it. So obviously that's not going to be the most important thing. And for some people, obviously it will be the most important thing. But then it's like, take this information and like cross-reference it and synthesize it into like a more cohesive thought. And I guess put it into like a hierarchy of like where is this for the individual?
yeah. Yeah, and there's nested hierarchies here. I mean, it really gets to be a complex system and I feel like for when I hang out with you, I get this feeling of I use the word complexity. Like there's a simplicity on the other side of complexity, which includes all the complexity. Like I can see the complexity of all the different supplements that you take and the different data that you collect on yourself with your devices, and you've got red light therapies and your workout routines, and there's all kinds of complexity, but there's a simplexity it feels like you've realized on the other side of that, which is transcended all the complexity and actually seems you don't seem to be efforting a lot or trying a lot or having to navigate a lot of variables all day, every day. There's a complex system that's been transcended in a way and included in your experience, but is not taking up a lot of your bandwidth, seemingly from an outside view.
Yeah, that's accurate. Like I will research something extensively and then I will decide whether I want to add it to my routine. I'll add it to my routine. I'll see how I feel, how I do with that new addition. And then I'll leave it there for a while and I'll cycle in and out. And then after a while, if I forget all the reasons I added, I'll do my own research again and be like, okay, well, they what I'm coming across now is not as compelling as what it was back then, or it's more compelling. So now I'm going to re-weight this in my protocol a little more. Like when I was researching sunlight and what light, water, and magnetism do for the body, very compelling. I looked down all the mechanisms and pathways that works on the body, and I said, okay, obviously it's important for me to get some sunlight. So I'm going to do that, and ideally I'm going to sun gaze, which I did for many years when I was living in New York City, especially. And then I don't remember all the pathways and different molecules it activates because I don't need to these days. I just add it to my routine. And then when I forget and I have an interest, like, is this actually making a difference? I can look at those again. And I can also just try removing it and see how I feel.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because like a lot of the basics are very simple, and some of these biohacks are cool. Like the red light therapy is nice. It's not as important to me as getting out early in the morning and going for a walk in the natural sunlight.
Hmm.
But if I can't get out there, it's nice to be able to have that, have a vitamin D lamp here that I can use that has a little bit of UVB in it that helps me stimulate vitamin D production, and nitric oxide and some of the things you don't get from just like the indoor lighting.
Right. It's a staple for me as well. Get outside, go for a walk, especially without sound. Like it's really important. Um, one of my little hacks is I do this because I facilitate trauma work with people, and when people are really activated, we have an evolutionary programming deep down in our biology, way below our conscious awareness, that when birds are singing around us, that it means it's safe. Like when there's a
Mm.
predator nearby, the birds don't do that. And so going out early, getting the sunlight, going for a walk, breathing, and listening to the birds, all of that is a cocktail for like.
Yeah. And there's also the fractals in nature, the geometric patterns that don't apply, like, don't exist indoors unless we try and recreate it. But like you look outside and you see Fibonacci sequence and all kinds of different things that are only there, and all these have like a collective, combined soothing effect on the nervous system. And the way the nervous system is meant to operate is to be in the soothed mode most of the day, the parasympathetic, and then with occasional bouts into the fight, flight, or flee mode.
Okay, I still want to go into nervous system stuff more. I want to go into nervous stuff more. Before we do that, I've got your website up, outlier.com, which I'll include in the show notes. It's spelled Outliyer, Outliyer.com for anybody listening and you want to check out Nick. And you've got these outcomes on your website, these 10 different outcomes: stress, fat loss, brain power, sleep, muscle strength, gut health, supplements, longevity, energy, hydration. And I keep wanting to go to sleep and
Mm,
talk about that more. And I
mm.
keep wanting to go to supplements and talk about that more. So maybe
Yeah,
we can spend a minute here and then do some nervous system jamming.
sure. Yeah. So first of all, I chose those because those were like the most common questions and topics that people wanted me to cover. And so I created like a little roundups of resources of like key facts and articles and podcast episodes and products that can help support those goals. But the first one you want to start with was sleep.
Yeah, I want because that's when we talk about the growth side of things, the anabolic side of things, which to
Yeah.
me feels more yin, right? You talked about yin.
Yes. Yep.
Sleep is so underrated in my judgment. I mean, I just would love for you to talk about sleep and yeah.
Yeah. Sleep is one of those areas where when I was younger, I was like, okay, I'm spending a third of my life in this state. Perhaps I can find a way of shortcutting it. And I learned very quickly. I tried polyphasic sleep, and there's different protocols out there. And the only one that actually ended up working for me was it's biphasic. So you have like one longer chunk of sleep where you sleep 5 or 6 hours and then you have a nap. It's like the Spanish siesta model. That one worked, but the rest of them, like there's one where you sleep like 30 minutes, like 6 or 8 times a day. It's called Uberman. And those are fine. I mean, I don't know if those are fine actually. Those can work for some people, but if you miss a single one of those at any point, then the whole thing comes crashing down. But also, it's like if humans are going to be in a state where they're completely like unconscious and like, unable to flee predators, there's probably a reason that so much time and energy and resources are devoted to being in this state because otherwise evolutionarily it would have been selected against. And so I think it's Dr. Matthew Walker says that wakefulness is like low level damage and sleep is regeneration. It's that important to biology. Like most of the body's repair and growth and mechanisms occur exclusively during sleep, or the vast majority of them occur during sleep. So it's one of those things like high performers want to shortchange, but then you look at like a lot of the most successful people and they spend a ton of time in sleep. I think LeBron James sleeps 10 hours a day or 12 hours a day. It's like a very long amount because like that's how you get the most recovery and growth. It's not the time that's you're awake, that you're working out. It's what happens after that. And a lot of people think they have the gene that lets them get by with 5 hours, 6 hours of sleep and to thrive on that. But the prevalence of that in the general population is like, it's so low that you're more likely to be struck by lightning than to have that gene.
Wow.
So, what most people can do to figure out how much sleep they actually need, the easy way, because once we're in a lifestyle pattern of sleeping and waking according to a schedule dictated by work or other obligations, it's very hard to know how much we actually need because kind of like the frog who's in the kettle that gets the heat gets turned up, we stop noticing, we can become like habituated to the effects of the amount of sleep we're getting. So if you take a weekend and you remove yourself from your home, or at least you turn off all screens, technology, all that stuff, you just get away from it for one weekend and try and follow that natural light cycle. If you are camping, you have a campfire, that's fine. It's not going to disturb your sleep. But then just notice when you naturally fall asleep, when you naturally wake up, and that can help you have a better idea of how much sleep you need and also what your sleep timing should be, because then you can work back and you can figure out when should you be eating. So you have a couple hours between your last meal and when you go to sleep. And then based on that, you know when you have lunch and breakfast, and you can just backfill the rest of the day.
There's I love that we're having this conversation, and I feel so I want to name the recovery period because we talked about earlier the diet that gets you healthy might not be the diet that sustains you or helps you live your life. Similar to the sleep patterns, like I can remember there was a time a few years ago, it was like the first time I made $35,000 in a month, and I wasn't chronically stressed out about how was I going to pay for something tomorrow, basically. Like I got out of that survival consciousness, and I literally spent like 2 months just taking Epsom salt baths every day and delivering coaching to my clients and like eating. I mean, God, I ate thousands of calories every day in that time period. And I was in this deep recovery mode. I mean, I was sleeping all night. I was taking naps all day. I mean, it was like a big regenesis time period, right? And I know that I mean, I don't know about now, but I know years ago, like when I would go camping, it's like the polarity between the life that I was living and what happened when I had a natural weekend was so intense. I didn't even know what to do with it.
Yeah. Yeah, but again, you look gravitated naturally towards really amping up your recovery practices afterward. Even just taking Epsom salt baths is a huge one. That's a good recovery activity. Eating is another one. Hydrating, sleeping more and longer. It seems like you intuitively knew that after a long period of intense work, you needed that.
Actually, Nick, it's crazier than that. I was in survival-based fear consciousness about money specifically. I mean, I was homeless at one point. I completely ran out of money, and I was living in the like, what do I do?
Mm.
Uh, how do I get like I have to build a thing and make a bring a dollar together. I was just like, I mean, I was just like in a
Yeah.
like, can I catch a break? And then I met this woman who had spent 20 years studying with Chinese masters in energy work. And
Hmm.
with her name's Sarah McCrum. She channeled a book from money. And I found her work and I connected with her. And she goes, Forrest, you need to relax. And I'm like, Sarah, what the fuck are you talking about? I need to relax. I don't have any money. What are you talking about? I need to relax. And so it was actually my meaning. I mean, this is meaning making. Who knows why anything actually happens? But my meaning making is that it was by stopping and starting to consciously relax that opened up the possibility to make the $35,000 in the
Uh,
first place, which then like she was the one saying take salt baths and lemon baths, and then the eating and the sleep and everything came online. But I needed coaching or permission from somebody else to have a breakthrough because I had been years in like a really intense lifestyle, intermittent fasting with black coffee, doing like one meal a day, Wim Hof method, entrepreneurship, running up and down mountains, powerlifting. I mean, it was just like a really intense, way too yang expression. And I was literally running on fumes. I mean, my whole system was redlined, and so there had to be a whole regenesis process. But it wasn't like I got the money and then I could relax. It was by relaxing, the deeper tides cleared. That's my meaning making of it.
yeah. Yeah, and the caveat to what I was saying about the camping weekend too is that if you are under intense stress, sleep deprivation, all those factors, kind of like your situation, you might sleep for 12, even longer, 14 hours. And that's not necessarily going to be like the way it is for you. going forward, but like that's what your body is asking for in the short term at least, so that you can get out of this like recovery hole that you're currently in.
And it's the season for it. I talk to somebody every day. I had a call earlier today with someone I've known for a long time. She was a CTO in a startup for the last 7 years, and I've known her the whole time. One of my favorite human beings in the whole world. And she's been miserable, quite frankly. Like miserable to the point that when I would reflect it back to her, she didn't want to hear it from me. But I talked to her today and she's 5 weeks out of that job and she's going, Forrest, I'm sleeping 12 hours every night. And I'm,
Wow.
yeah, you are, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And she looks better than I've ever seen her. But it seems to be the season right now for taking care of yourself. So that's an invitation to everybody listening.
Yeah, it's a good one. And also, the winter in general is predominated by darkness, and it's considered like the melatonin season because melatonin is the hormone of darkness. And humans naturally existed and had these push-pull cycles of the seasons that would force us into certain things, certain diets, but then also certain bouts of like, hey, we can't actually work when it's 5 p.m. because it's completely pitch black outside. So this is going to be the season of recovery and regeneration versus the summer is naturally predominated by light. And so we're going to get less sleep and we're going to be out doing more stuff. And that's just like part of like the ancestral medicines are living in accordance with natural rhythms, including the seasons.
Okay, supplements. I'm
Supplements.
curious. What I have not heard, I mean, I'm sure someone like Dave Asprey or people do this kind of thing. But give us like the five or whatever number, make up whatever you want. But give us the things that people listening can add to their life to enjoy more well-being.
So the caveat is it's going to depend on the person. Like the most impactful things that you can do are to make sure you're not deficient in any of the vital nutrients and specifically vitamins, minerals. Like no one wants to hear those, very boring. But like if you're deficient in, say, a fat soluble vitamin, vitamin D, that's like a big one that people talk about. Vitamin D, I prefer, if possible, to get it from the actual sun instead of in a capsule, because when you're exposed to the sun, you're getting a lot of different photo byproducts beyond just vitamin D. It's not a perfect proxy uh, I mean, it is. It's supposed to be a proxy for the amount of light exposure you're getting. If your vitamin D levels are low, it means you're not getting enough of the other important stuff you're getting from the sun as well. So taking it as a supplement can be helpful, but it's still best to try and get more natural light. But all the vitamins in general in the body have like really foundational, significant roles. And the order of operations to me is minerals, then vitamins, then going on to like whatever area you need the most support in, whether it's an organ system or it's a particular function, it's an outcome you want. Because like the minerals are often cofactors for a lot of the vitamins, meaning that if you want to take vitamin D as a supplement, it does better, it works more effectively if you also have magnesium alongside it. And most people, because of farming practices, stress, like high stress lifestyles, which causes nutrient burn, meaning that like we burn through nutrients faster, uh, through like toxin exposure in our everyday lives. We're more deficient in minerals than we are in vitamins because, like, say magnesium, that's like one of the big hot ones everyone talks about. When you cook, first of all, the plants come depleted in magnesium because of farming, because of acid rain. I broke down or like a thorough article on all the reasons that supplements are necessary this day and age. And then we take it, we get it to the house. The magnesium has further decayed since we picked it, since we picked the produce, whatever it is. And then after that, then we cook it, and then that further depletes the magnesium. Calcium, less so, because calcium is more stable to the heat, so it stays at a higher level and it's easier to get in the diet. Magnesium is very commonly deficient, and deficiency is hard to test for, and it's also it masquerades as a bunch of different symptoms. So it's like you might think you're dealing with anxiety that's just a part of your personality or cardiovascular issues, but it's really just a simple magnesium deficiency. And the testing available for it is not very good. So starting with like a really high quality multi-mineral product is where I like to begin. And yes, the electrolytes are minerals. And then after that, making sure you're getting enough of the vitamins, ideally getting them from food as well. And then once you have those, then you can go on to the fancier stuff. And if you do this first, the fancier stuff works better, more effectively with fewer side effects too.
And how do you test your vitamins and minerals, and how do you track them through time?
So, I mean, really, there's the testing, like it's usually done through blood, but blood is often very inaccurate for most of the minerals. There's also hair tissue mineral analysis that some people use. Again, it has lots of issues. So I don't worry about my vitamin and mineral levels very much. I just take a multi-mineral product, and that I find has worked well. And I notice some of the symptoms I experienced, like from like muscle cramping and stuff like that from exercise plus sauna plus all the other lifestyle stuff I do, those went away completely. And I just feel better, more clear, more capable when I consistently use them over time.
Well, if you've got a what's it called, an affiliate link for your multi-mineral product, we can include that in the show notes if people want to sign up through your checkout link and send you some money. That'd be fun.
Yeah, and to me, it's like if I find something else that is better that I'm not affiliated with, I don't care. Like I just want to find the best possible product that makes the most difference for me and then also for the other people. Because like it'd be nice. I love the idea of not having to use anything. And of course, I go long periods where I'll travel and I'll just say, you know what, no supplements for a bit. But then it's like you get back to the damage mitigation. I'm going to be eating out a lot. Okay. I'm going to be eating out a lot. I'm going to get a lot of oxidized oils that I don't want to consume. Not the best. So what can I do about this? And then it's like just finding the damage remediation options, and supplements tend to be very effective for that. And even for like when I'm exposed to like high non-native electromagnetic fields, then I want to make sure that I like buffer my cells. I get the foundational antioxidants because I can't always control my exposure. And if I have those in place, my biology will fare better over the long term.
And this would be like in a corporate office building, for example.
Corporate office building, in an airport, the airport's a really big one, but also just like public settings, even especially in big cities. You like go downtown, and then all of a sudden there's like these big 5G towers all over the place, which is fine. Your body can withstand it, but like if you're gonna be there frequently, even if you're not electro hypersensitive, it still has an impact on your cells because essentially radio frequencies are like non-visible light. They're on the same light spectrum. They're just not visible. And your body operates through electricity before chemicals. So to me, like it's intuitively obvious that you don't want to expose yourself to really, really powerful signals that are thousands, if not millions of times more powerful than your body's built-in electric signals. And by making sure that you have like you're at least giving your cells the opportunity, the ability to protect themselves with nutrients, it's a good, easy place to start.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, you mentioned seed oils when you eat out. I might just, because I know we're getting ready to talk about the nervous system here in our last few minutes. So I might just add a couple of things that I like, general rules of thumb for me that have been supportive for listeners are avoiding seed oils. Like I made this card a few years ago where I wrote in green the number of fats and oils that I like using, and it was like four or five of them, right? Ghee, butter, avocado oil, olive oil, coconut oil, right? It was like those
Hmm.
five. I think tallow, beef tallow. So you got
Yep.
like
Yep.
six green, and then the list of red is like unfathomably long, right? Like I mean,
Yeah.
sunflower,
Unfortunately, yeah, that's the way it
sunflower.
goes. And one of the first things I do when I help people with their diet specifically is I just like go into their kitchen. I'm like, this oil, like change this oil out, change this oil out. Like it's such an easy, low-hanging like, way to improve the quality of the diet. And like it doesn't require you actually stop eating a lot of like the favorite foods. Like just use a different fat instead. And especially because the half-life of fats in the body is super long. It's like 2 years. So it takes like up to 6 years to replace all of the polyunsaturated fats that are oxidized in your body with new, healthier fats.
Yeah, so if you're listening to this, if you look up polyunsaturated fats or PUFAs, PUFA, those would be what we're talking about avoiding here. Um,
Yeah. And Dr. Kate Shanahan has a list that she calls the hateful eight. And these are like the eight oils that everyone should be avoiding. And to put a caveat here, to me, like there's a lot of mixed opinion on this, but like if you're getting natural sources of polyunsaturated fatty acids, such as in fish,
Mhm.
such as in nuts, it's not going to be the same because you have like protective antioxidants like vitamin E and selenium and things like that to make it so that these oils don't break down and go rancid in the body as fast.
Right. That's right. That's right. Yeah, so I oftentimes have people ask me like, what are your basics for diet and health and nutrition and stuff? So I say no PUFAs and look that up. So we're talking about the hateful eight, or we're talking about different oils. What's a green? What's a red? I talk about having water with salt, like getting enough electrolytes or taking an
Mhm.
electrolyte supplement,
Mhm.
sunlight, which we talked about, sleep. And then I just talk about avoiding food dyes and high fructose
Mm,
corn syrup.
yeah.
And I feel like, and then you mentioned it, like whole foods, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about the grocery store. I'm talking about really what the invitation is actually get your food as close to the source as you can, because um, it was a few years ago I started to realize if I ate a burger, I could tell the quality of life that the cow had. It was like, this is a sad cow that was not treated,
Oh,
like the energetics of the cow's life are in the meat, duh, like that its emotions and its energy versus like if you have a burger from a cow that lived a really happy life and had a lot of fun and enjoyed itself, it tastes completely different. It feels completely different to eat. It's an entirely different experience.
yeah. And also in that meat, there's something called microRNA, which once you consume that, it's detectable in your bloodstream within 15 minutes of consumption. So it's like there is already at least one known mechanism, and there's probably a bunch of others that are yet to be elucidated by science.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there's probably a trillion that we just don't know where they are or how to
Yeah.
we're not even looking for them because most people don't
Yeah.
have this worldview. So anyway, those are a few basics. And now I want to transition into the nervous system and talk to you about that for our last few minutes here. Because my story is that I might just be speaking about myself, but my story is it's about humanity, 8 billion people. We are like chronically overstimulated and dysregulated. So let's chat about the nervous system.
Yeah. Well, I want to take a moment to just pause us right here in the conversation. And for a couple of seconds, let's just take an in breath, but most importantly, let's make the out breath longer than the in breath. So we'll do like what, 10 seconds? Just inhale and then so let's take a 5 second inhale and then a 7 second exhale. Ready? All right. Well, the breath is one of the fastest ways to shift the state of our nervous system. And all the stuff we've covered so far today can be quite overwhelming. And this is all information, of course. And so is the information we get on our phones, in our environments. Taking a few minutes to notice when there's a lot that you're processing and just breathing properly can make a world of difference. And it's one of those like foundational habits, like de-stressing habits that can translate and transform quality of life and also make you like less reactive to the people around you and show up better in meetings and think clearer. So really just it's an important part to a daily routine is like taking a moment for your own nervous system away from the stimulation, whether it's in meditation or it's breathing or it's something else.
Thank you for that. And I'm hoping our audience did it with us or is doing it now. Just inviting our listeners here with us to do a 5 second inhale and 7 second exhale. And you're invited to keep doing that through the end of the podcast and as long as you want.
And
Um,
the reason that works too is that your heart rate changes constantly as you're breathing. And that's like there's a metric that measures the delta, the time between heartbeats, and that's called heart rate variability. And when you inhale, your heart rate speeds up. And when you exhale, your heart rate slows down. And I actually have a brain measuring device, an EEG here that I can actually see that occurring through that in my heart rate variability in real time. And it's profound what difference that makes in within 30 seconds, 60 seconds of doing that. But like, since we're talking about a lot of stuff that can be fear inducing or like make people wonder about their current lifestyle habits, I think it's important to ground this in like, it's okay. You're doing great wherever you are. Just being here, sitting through this, listening with some degree of an open mind is plenty. And it's not about making the overnight shift and just dropping everything. It's about like the gradual shifts and being in it for the long term.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
A lot of the body workers will even say that like in order to make an effective change, I need to have your nervous system in the right place. So I won't even work on you until your nervous system is in a state of acceptance. And then my craniosacral therapy, my other body work, then it can all actually have lasting effects. Otherwise, it's like you're hacking the body and you're fighting against it rather than working with it. And if you're fighting against the body, it will always eventually win.
I want to play with this inhale and exhale more because you invited me and the listeners to take a 5 second inhale and then a 7 second exhale. And I notice I get curious, like, what's that like in life to take a shorter, like a 5 second inhale and a 7 second exhale? It feels like a different tempo than maybe I'm living most of the day, or maybe most of us are living most of the day.
Hmm. Well, there's a rationale and uses for different breath work styles and modalities. Like the Wim Hof method, for example, is very different than that. And you can use your breath to also like turn up the dial on your nervous system and put you more into a sympathetic mode to perform. But even then, there's a guy named, I think his name's, what's his name? Patrick or Brian uh McEwen, I think it is. And he teaches athletes how to really push the floor of their performance higher. And so they will do nose breathing and they will control their inhalation and exhalation for longer. So that way they can excel at their sport. And then just for a split second here, there, for like a turbo boost, basically, they will use a shorter breath and they'll breathe out of their mouth instead. So you can use this strategically throughout your life. But like when you keep your nervous system in a state of calm by default, that's when like the magic happens.
I've really been experimenting with this these last couple of years. Like, you and I talked about this one day, but like going to the gym and then sitting there with weights and just relaxing and waiting and waiting and waiting. And then at some point, the body starts to move them, but it's the most surrendered, relaxed way to lift weights. It's the opposite of some big sympathetic expression of like, rah! It's this very, it's almost like yogic or it feels more like disintegrating through movement. And I do that now going on runs, right? It's like,
Hmm.
how relaxed can I be while running? And I've seen, I don't know who I don't know if I've seen the same person you're speaking about, whether it's Brian or Patrick. I don't know who I've seen, but I've seen them training people with mouth tape on and tracking heart rate variability and seeing, can we actually slow down or decrease heart rate variability, increase the space between heartbeats, and get into deeper parasympathetic while being in exercise. And I just find that a fascinating line of exploration.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's also in the bodybuilding world, there's a lot of talk about like what substances can we use to keep us more relaxed until we need to like flip the switch and then expend all this energy. So it's interesting to hear like, yeah, you could use a substance for this, or you can just like decide how you're going to train and just keep your nervous system calm until you need to explode metaphorically, and then you can let all that energy like express itself.
It's interesting what happens for me when actually in this moment. You mentioned men's work earlier, and there's something here for me in masculinity of like uh my friend Hannah has this article that's called Soft Cock and Hard Cock Masculinity. And so she talks about like hard cock masculinity is like the penetrative, like fully erect, raw form of masculinity that we all have seen from like war stories and everything. But the soft cock masculinity is like provision, for example. It's that like my actual theory of talking to her about it is like I think the reason the dad bod is going so viral with women right now is like a lot of women are like, I don't actually want this like rah super machismo like fully erect masculine energy all the time. I want this like soft, chill, everything's okay. You're doing great, honey. Like you want another order of chicken wings or something, like just very like chilled out, relaxed energy. And yeah, that's just happening for me as I'm listening to you. We've talked about entrepreneurship and being an athlete and men's work, and now we're in the nervous system. And it feels like we're tracing along this arc too of yeah, what's it like to be a human being? What's it like to be a man? What's it like to have a masculine expression in both sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system tones?
Yeah. And I think also one of the through lines here in the men's work and everything we've discussed so far is like the willingness to explore different parts of ourselves and also like to go from extreme masculine to more of the feminine side and then like play around with that balance and realize that like you are who you are and you can express yourself in all kinds of different ways and it's pathologic to for a man to always be in masculine constantly 24/7 and it's pathologic to never be in the masculine and there's a dance that happens and especially when partners are involved but not even always then even just between ourselves like to notice how we go from one to the other and to be not just okay with it but to recognize that that's like part of the life experience.
I love that you're saying this too, because I really want to echo like how much I still enjoy. I mean, just before this podcast, I was out running sprints and I was doing functional movement stuff like lunges kind of things. Like I love to really get it. I love to get into a really intense flow state and channel a whole article or web page or whatever it is. So it's not that we're making this wrong. It's just talking about a more inclusive picture that
Mhm.
includes this kind of expression.
Yeah. And I know from my own experience, like, looking around in my life, some of the most powerful men around me specifically are not at all afraid of their feminine and they actually embrace it and they have no problem expressing it. And it's just like a part of who they are. And I also like look at the men who can't do that, which was myself not too long ago. And to me, it shows a level of like not vulnerability, but a level of like discomfort, dis-ease in who they are. And it's like once you embrace who you are, there's like a level of cohesion and cohesiveness that like is really palpable and powerful.
Way more organic, way more and natural and just easy.
Yeah. It's like more multi-dimensional too. It's like anyone can do this one thing, but then to have like the full complex expression of humanity and life inside the body, inside the vessel, that's a thing of beauty.
Hmm. Beautiful. That feels like a great note to end on. Let's end here.
Awesome.
I want to encourage people who are listening, if you're enjoying Nick and want to get to know him more, you can go check out his website, outlier.com. I'll link it in the show notes. Nick, do you have some kind of session where people can book an hour with you or some kind of like if people are listening and going like, okay, I want to talk to Nick about my vitamins and minerals and blood tests and longevity and muscle strength. Do you have some kind of offer in this way that people can reach out and sign up?
Not currently. I've paused that, but I will give you a link that you can put in the show notes for your audience, though.
Oh, right on. You hear that, everybody? I'm gonna call that special treatment for our listeners here. That's great.
Yes, exactly. Of
Yeah,
course,
so
this has been a blast.
yeah, it's been great. Thanks, Nick, and yeah, I'll see you soon.
It sounds good. All
Okay.
right.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next episode. Lots
Thanks
of
for listening.